Hey, welcome to another episode of Coffee HEMA with me, Jamie McKeever. Today, I want to talk about warnings, giving warnings as a judge, giving warnings, setting warnings as part of your tournament rules, and some of the things that people get wrong, I think, with warnings in general and why we don't give enough of them. So I'll start with that. I'll start by saying I don't think people give warnings enough. I think people are hesitant, especially new judges are hesitant to warn a fencer. Partly, I think, because you're probably friends with them, or you know them, or maybe you respect them, and it can feel weird to be telling them off. I'll come back to that. Or you don't want to end someone's day by penalizing them. You don't want to piss anybody off, right? And to a certain extent, some of doing it better is just kind of getting over that uncomfortableness. Do it a few times, and you'll become more comfortable with doing it more. I can tell you that much for free. But I think one of the reasons why we have that mindset is that people think about warnings in the wrong way, right? And penalties, I think, is the other thing that people call it. And warning and penalty, I think warning is a better word, because penalty sounds like we're punishing them. We're saying, you're bad, I'm punishing you, this is your fine, this is your infraction. Whereas if you think about warning, what we're actually saying is that, look, no, this is a thing you need to be aware of because it's a danger sign. It's like a warning sign on a road or something like that, right? Or a hazard sign on a door, electricity inside or whatever it is. This is telling you, no, there's a line, do not cross it. And the thing to think about with warnings, as a judge or as an organizer, is the purpose of a warning is not to penalize the fencer, it is to get the fencer to change their behavior. Penalizing them is one of the tools that we have to get them to change their behavior. And if they're not changing their behavior, the warnings might escalate to the ultimate penalty of being kicked out of the tournament or banned for life or anything like that, right? So there are penalties attached to it, but the purpose of the warning is not to penalize. The purpose of the warning is to get them to change what they are doing, right? So keep that in your head. With that in mind, there's a few things that you need to be aware of about doing them that should make it easier to do them. First of all, they should be early, right? Early, you shouldn't be waiting to warn until somebody has been injured. If there are things earlier that might lead to injury in the wrong circumstances, that's what you should be warning, right? Because an injury normally happens when somebody is doing something unsafe and there was something else, right? Heavy hitting to a protected target will normally lead to bruising, painful hits, absolutely can happen. And in some cases, heavy hitting, for instance, to the head, yes, that can go directly to causing concussions. But for the most part, proper injuries happen when there's a heavy hit and an equipment failure, or it hits a gap, or the other fencer does something else as well at the same time that causes problems too, or maybe all of the above, right? So the warning shouldn't be focused on the outcome. The warning should be focused on the behavior that might lead to the outcome in the wrong circumstances. And when giving that warning, you need to think about your tone as a judge, because I think that is important for a few reasons. One, because it makes it less confrontational and easier for you to do. And two, because it actually makes it easier for the person to adapt, right? So thinking about human psychology, especially when you are pumped full of adrenaline. If somebody comes at you confrontationally and says something like, warning, red fencer, heavy hitting, I never want to see that again. As an example. And I've heard this from across the room sometimes, right? Even more like scolding a schoolboy child than that. A person's natural reaction to that is to get defensive. I'm not doing anything wrong. What are you talking about? This is fine, right? Or to kind of, oh, I'm sorry, right? But it's not actually something that's going to change particularly adult behavior very well. It also is much harder for you, you are basically initiating a confrontation with the fencer at that point. Right? And that's not something that's particularly comfortable as the person doing it either, right? Especially if that's your friend or, your colleague or, it could be your instructor, or someone you respect. So the tone of language when you are giving that warning should be about encouraging them and being very clear to them what they did wrong. Because the other problem with what I said before, heavy hitting, it's not really, apart from, okay, you're hitting too hard, you've not really given them any cues to say, well, what that is. It's a bit like saying no quality. If you haven't said that it's because it was flat, they're now going to guess, but what did I do wrong and do it? So my advice would be, if an exchange has happened that requires a warning, before you call the scores, what I do is I go up to the fencer and I say, okay, I need to let you know. The force levels that you're putting into this strike are beyond what I'm happy with. I can see that you are really charging it up. I'm concerned that in the wrong circumstances, that's going to cause an injury to your opponent. I'm going to be giving you a warning. What I want to see is that to come down. Okay? Thanks. Go back, call the scores, and then say, additionally, warning, red fencer, hitting too hard. Or if the scores aren't relevant because of whatever happens to be, don't call them, whatever your call happens to be. You are much more likely to get a response from that fencer of, okay, cool. And if it's heavy hitting that you're warning for, because there could be other warnings, it could be back ahead and things like that, but even that, I wouldn't just say, oh, heavy hitting, oh, back ahead. I would say, okay, you come in for the, actually, this is real examples from Albion, right? Recently, there was a fencer who kept showing back ahead. So I came up to him and said, look, this is what's happening. You're coming in and you're retreating by turning like this and running away. Okay, and when you do that, your back ahead gets exposed, and that's a warning under the system. So it was a very lovely hit. I'm not going to be able to score it because I can't score it if you're being penalized at the same time under the rules. What I want to see is you just retreating with your face directed at the opponent. If you do that, you would have scored 3, but unfortunately now I'm going to penalize you, and if it keeps escalating, I might get a point and a penalty from it, okay? And when I've had that kind of conversation with a fencer, I've never had anything but a positive response. And it's weird to say that, I'm warning you and you're getting a positive response. They're like, okay, thank you for explaining it, cool. They might come up to me after the fight and say, look, I didn't quite follow, can you explain that again to me, right? And sometimes the one that people get pissed off about is if I'm warning for back ahead for the passato sotto, which if you don't know is basically a really low thrust and coming down like this, and the back ahead is exposed in the process of doing that. But you can do it with your head up, it is possible to do it. But people get grumpy because it is a text play and they get warned for it. People get grumpy about that one, but I think that's more because of its relationship to the book than anything else, rather than the tone. So what I'm trying to say, right, and heavy hitting is the same, right? If there is something you can point to say why that looks like a heavy hit, often like people really charging with the full body, the shoulder would kind of jumping up with the attack as they do it, kind of clearing with their feet. I warned someone for doing, literally they did a diving kind of jump attack as a joke for the last exchange. I warned someone for that as well. And pointing to, this is the thing, right? Not heavy hitting is what gets recorded at, or whatever it happens to be, or unsafe behavior. But what I'm warning you for is this specific action. That's what I don't want you to see in future. And that way they can act on that pretty straightforwardly. And you do not feel like someone who's telling them off. You feel like someone who's trying to help them follow the rules, which is, as I say, the purpose of the warning. Last thing, warn early, right? Probably warn more often. If you've gotten through a tournament and you've not warned anybody, unless everybody is super well behaved, probably you're not warning enough, right? Because adrenaline is pumping, people will do weird things, and especially a large scale tournament with lots of people from different fencing cultures who haven't necessarily fenced on that rule set, it is likely that somebody will step over the line at some point, right? So if you find yourself never giving warnings across the whole tournament, have a think about that. If you can watch video back with some of the organizers, maybe see if you can work out when you should have warned people as well, okay? So that's the main things. But yeah, ultimately, do not come across as telling somebody off. All that will do is get their back up and make them not want to comply, go away and grumble to their friends. Why was I warned for this afterwards, right? You need to be very specific about what rules are and how you do it. And a direct conversation is far better than shouting across the piste when they probably can't hear you over the sound of the rest of the tournament and their fencing mask. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to request that I talk about a particular topic, or would just like to support this and similar videos in future, please head on to my Coffee page, buy me a coffee, request a topic, or head over to my Patreon page to support safety research for HEMA.